Küresel Değer Zinciri ve G20, Hindistan'ın Türkiye Büyükelçisi Sayın Doktor Virander Paule, kendisini davet edelim. His Excellency, Ambassador of India. May I invite you please to the stage?
Thank you for the welcome, Mr. Abdullah, dear Chairman of the Executive Board of the Istanbul Economy Summit, your entire team of the summit, my dear friends. To begin with, I would like to thank you for giving me this happy privilege to join the Istanbul Economy Summit with the focus on global value chains. I'm delighted to be here in the company of this distinguished gathering of economists, of business leaders, academics, policymakers, policy analysts, experts, and senior government representatives, and I'm sure that there are representatives here from other vocations as well. I'm relatively new in Turkey, but I've learned that this summit is considerably prominent in the calendar of economic events in this most vibrant and beautiful city. It's very interesting to see the wide-ranging topics that will be discussed today and tomorrow as part of the summit. The concept of global value chains, now this term, global value chains, each and every word of this term, global value and chains, it's very important and it's hugely multidisciplinary and complex. It's highly topical in the contemporary world. It's also easily understandable why it has remained prominently on the G20 agenda in recent times. It will no doubt be a focus under India's G20 presidency as well. Let me first share with you some pointers relating to India's G20 presidency. It was precisely a week ago, on the 1st of December, it was a proud moment for India to assume the responsibility of the G20 chair. The theme chosen by India is One Earth, One Family and One Future, and it is aimed at promoting a universal sense of oneness for global progress. G20, as you know, brings together the 20 major economies of the world, representing 85% of the global GDP, 75% of international trade, and 2/3 of the world's population. That is the nature and scale of what it represents on the global stage. The G20 in the contemporary world is the premier grouping devoted to addressing global financial, economic, and developmental challenges of the day. The G20 presidency comes to India at a very challenging time, when the world is grappling with the economic and social consequences of the global pandemic, a crisis that has aggravated the financial situation across the world, with the developing countries finding it much harder to recover. The pandemic has also greatly undermined action on sustainable development goals. There have been serious challenges in finding equitable solutions for global health issues. At the same time, prevailing geopolitical tensions have also acutely aggravated the challenges of availability and affordability of energy, food, and fertilizers, beside other things. Then there are other major global challenges and global issues: terrorism, climate change, and here I refer to climate action and climate justice, sustainable development, and global governance. As we consider the challenges of climate action, we will, during our G20 presidency, spotlight LIFE, L-I-F-E. This is an acronym for Lifestyle for Environment, with its associated environmentally sustainable and responsible choices. at the level of individual lifestyles as well as national development. We also give high importance to solutions through digital transformation based on inclusive digital architecture. As we all know, digital use brings both scale and speed as we seek solutions to these pressing problems of the day. It's also a time when we need to become the voice of the global South that is otherwise underrepresented in such forums. Our G20 priorities will be shaped by the interests of the global South. Let me now briefly touch upon the more specific issue of global value chains. Over the last 2 decades, trade and production have become increasingly organized around global value chains, in short, GVCs. At present, about 70% of international trade is accounted for by GVCs, which have proliferated through advances in communication, information, and transportation technologies, besides some other trade policy factors. Participating in GVCs is widely associated with economic benefits, such as productivity and employment creation, and considered one of the driving forces of growth and development worldwide. In developed economies, GVCs provide access to more competitively priced inputs, higher variety, and economies of scale, whereas for emerging economies, GVCs are generally viewed as a fast track to industrialization. There are also considerable gaps among the G20 grouping itself in terms of individual countries' participation in GVCs. Previous G20 presidencies have looked at several factors and issues such as digital trade, promoting resilience in GVCs for medical products, promoting inclusive agro-food GVCs, supporting SMEs for better distribution of gains from trade, and to develop initiatives to assist developing countries. Obviously, there are complexities involved, and there haven't been easy solutions. In more recent times, supply shocks resulting from the pandemic have further sharpened the focus on more inclusive and resilient GVCs. Let me mention some major questions that come up in this discourse. And these are: how can G20 countries enable resilience in GVCs and collectively deliberate on the mechanism of enhancing trade in terms of economic uncertainties? How can G20 countries enable greater participation of developing countries in GVCs? And how can G20 countries enable an ecosystem for cooperation for trade facilitation? Now, these are very obvious, very natural questions, and possible pathways and outcomes relevant to these questions deal with approaches to enable greater GVC participation of developing countries by facilitating coordination of multinational enterprises with firms in developing countries, and to cooperate in developing a common digital platform for trade facilitation, for ease of cross-border trade, as well as enhanced international regulatory cooperation for strengthening GVCs. In a nutshell, it will be a collective effort under Indian presidency of the G20 to shape a new paradigm of globalization, a paradigm of human-centric globalization. Now, let me bring my remarks to a close by summarizing the points that I seek to make at this summit. The G20 agenda is extensive. The issues on the agenda have far-reaching implications of global scale. We are dealing with this agenda in most challenging times, and the world is looking at the G20 with hope. In other words, the G20's hands are more than full. during India's G20 presidency, we will work for global consensus on all these issues. India's G20 presidency will be inclusive, ambitious, decisive, and action-oriented. So with these words, thank you once again for inviting me to this summit. You have my good wishes. Thank you.